This is Lisa Harrison, and today I'm doing a follow-up with Stephen Strong on the forgotten origins of humanity and this planet. Welcome back, Stephen.
Thank you for asking me back, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Well, I do believe you've got new information, some exciting information that will allow us to perhaps rethink and reconsider our history. So I have no idea what you're about to say, so I'm just
Know
going to hand it over
that.
to you.
Well, it came out of the fact ever since I've gone down this, how can I put it? Ever since I've gone down this alien sort of road, for the first time ever, I've been attacked from a science. I knew at the start, once I went down here, this was going to happen. And what I wanted to do today with your guidance and help was to sort of set out and give that a perspective and a context and sort of set out what that actually means and give some science, some genetics, all the different science we've had and put it into a sort of a new perspective and plus put in some new information that keeps coming in. So I want to approach this from a completely different aspect. I'd like to start, if it's possible, by sharing with you and your viewers and listeners, as the case may be, some of the stuff that's just come in, and then try and see if I can put that into perspective with stuff we've looked at before and show how there's an actual story here about the history of humanity, which is so different from what our kids have been taught and what we believe today.
Great.
Right. Well,
I'm ready
if
to
I
go.
can, let's start with the obvious. 4 books, 20 articles, and not once did we mention UFOs, Pleiadians, or any of this stuff. We kept away from this because we know once you walk down this path, you get attacked ad infinitum. And it's interesting, since we've gone down this path, some of the people actually working with us have basically walked away in disgust.
So up to that point, they're okay with the idea that perhaps humanity started in Australia and spread out from there. They were okay with turning that paradigm upside down?
Not a problem with that one.
Not a problem. Okay. But then when you want to take a step back and go, okay, but where did that start from? They just...
That's where the problems. I can think of one phone call, and of course I'm not going to use names, that would be wrong. I can think back to a phone call where this extremely helpful lady rang up and said, "What are you doing walking down there?" And it's quite funny. Her comment was, "Well, it could be true, but I've never seen one." And this is a very religious lady. And I said, "Well, that's fascinating." I said, "You believe in God, don't you?" And she said, "Oh, most definitely." "Have you seen it?"
Hmm.
And she stopped and said, "Well, no, but I know it's there." I said, "Well, what's the difference? Over 60% of the population on this planet that have been surveyed believe in UFOs, and I suspect the number of people who believe in a God is no different to that." Yet she couldn't make that leap of faith simply because she hadn't seen it, but she was quite prepared to believe in the existence of a nebulous being that basically has no physical presence whatsoever, is omnipotent and controls everything, but had a lot of issues with the idea could be someone or some beings more advanced than us. And it became obvious then that this was going to be a rather tortuous path we've been through. So, irrespective of the doubts,
But if there is, well, I'm just posing the question. I mean, if there is this all-encompassing, omnipresent, omnipowerful being that created the human race, why would this being restrict itself to one creation?
Well, we had some discussion about it. I'm afraid logic wasn't part of our discussion. It comes back down to, look, it's really obvious. Every time I raise this with someone who's supposedly academic or linked into universities, as soon as you use those 3 letters, UFO, there is a fascinating knee-jerk reaction. You can see the hackles stand up and you can see them backing away from you, virtually physically saying, "I don't want to talk about this anymore."
Because they can see their tenure going out the window.
Exactly. And it's very much a matter of, ever since von Daniken, and bless him for bringing quite a few important facts, but he also left himself open with a few mistakes. And what they have done is the academics en masse, like hyenas, have attacked the weak point and used that as a base. And ever since then, ever since that time, in academic circles, go to a university or go to any academic institution and find how much they talk about this area. And I guarantee you, you could count it in the seconds. It just doesn't get raised. So it's a tenuous and dangerous position to begin with. But fortunately, if I can, first up, because whenever I talk about any part of history, I always begin by talking about the Aboriginal perspective. Mm-hmm. And of course, the reason why I've gone down this line is because of an interview I conducted recently with some Aboriginal people that belong to that region, and they started to open my eyes to a new way of looking at this, and they actually forced me into a place that I never wanted to go. So could I first just give a setting behind that and give an original perspective about Pleiades and about this involvement and their gods? Remember, and I've said this before, the original people, I'm going to try and get rid of that ab part, call their gods sky heroes. That's very important. The second thing is that wherever I've been, and I've basically travelled all over Australia and been to every state and talked to elders all over, the same dreaming story reappears. The Seven Sisters and Pleiades. It got to the stage where my son and I, when we heard it again, would just smile at each other, not laughing at the people who tell us this story, but acknowledging, here it is again. Now, that's really important, and people may not understand that importance. You've got to remember, dreaming stories, for say any particular region, belong to the land of that region. If you've got a dreaming story about the creation of your totem, that won't go to another place because it doesn't belong to them. But it doesn't matter where I go in this country. The Seven Sisters, that seems to transcend all the other boundaries. It's everywhere.
Actually, so I found that myself when I was doing my research on the moon, talking to people from different areas, different country. They've got different stories about what the moon is.
Yeah.
And it was, it usually involved a relationship between a man and a woman somewhere along the line, but the stories and the details varied. But this one story that is universal, yeah?
It is universal. It's not just universal to Australia. You'll find it in ancient Greek mythology where it's nearly a recount word for what we have in the dreaming.
Okay.
Now, when I was given ceremony, I might have mentioned this before, I remember one of the elders came up to me and said, everything you've said is right, but when are you going to talk about outside, other ways of moving, UFOs? I said, when I get the evidence. Well, the evidence is in now. The evidence really is in. And if I can, I'm going to lead up to the tipping point, the part where I decided, well, I can't leave it anymore. I already knew the last not fully initiated, but the last elder in New South Wales that had the right to cut boys, and I might be wrong about this, he may be the second last, but I've been told he was the last, is a gentleman called Uncle Reuben Kelly, and he comes from the Dungutty region, which is down toward Kempsey. Now, he has recorded and told a story which basically says, and I'll get the words so I don't want to make a mistake there, our legends tell us that we came to this planet on a spaceship made of energy. When it hit this atmosphere, it turned to crystal. Now, I've known of that story for quite some time, but I just thought, okay, we'll leave that for now. I'm not going to go further down that line because that is really a dangerous line to walk.
Well, we talked about that last time when we talked about the glyphs and how you saw the crystal, the spaceships on the glyphs, and how they told that story of the ships coming down, crashing. One of them crashed, landed upside down, and all of that. That whole story is told in quite detail on the Gosford Glyphs.
Yeah, but I didn't go into some of the more stuff I've read since then, and we'll get to that soon, and I am going to come into that very quickly down the line. And that's even worse than saying the aliens are here, but we'll get to that in a second. That was another part of the story I had to force myself into. But I can add to this, and I'm not going to mention the name of the elder because we're in the process of interviewing him and filming this, so I don't want to give it up in advance, and I don't like mentioning people till it's been officially put in film. But I've now been in contact with another elder who was in contact with Uncle Reuben before he died. And he actually knows more of that story. In fact, he's painted. And what I can say is, and I'll be very careful about this, is there's more to that story than the crystal spaceship. There is a story of someone coming down And I'll give away one part of the story, coming down in what they call a diamond, and there's that crystal again. And that particular person, and I'm not going to mention their name yet, was like a Messiah, like a Jesus-like figure that gave these people, all the people around here, stories and wisdom to learn by and live by. So we now have a little bit more to Uncle Reuben's story that I didn't have before, that not only was there a spaceship that crashed, and that could have been the end of the story, but no, someone came down from that. And it's interesting. My understanding of that story is this has not just happened once. It's been continual. Now, all of that basically pushed me in the general direction. And then quite recently, and since I've spoken to you, we actually did an interview with two people, two elders from Darkingyong land.
Where's
now,
that?
Arnie Bev Spears is one, and as far as I'm concerned, she is what I would call the last full descent Darkingyong woman that comes from that country, because that particular region now has very, very, very few people that are linked directly to the land. And I'm not saying the other people don't have a right to be there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying she is the keeper of law and ancient stories.
Which area are we talking about?
So Arnie Bev Spears.
Which area?
Darkingyong is around Gosford region, okay? Sorry, I should have explained that first and given both descriptions. Now, in that story, which we're going to put up on YouTube, we're in the process of doing it, she started to give more of this clue. And she talked about this region, that Gosford region, as being the beginning place. The beginning place. And she said they have a story there where basically humanity, and I'm talking about Homo sapiens, begin in that region, then got so crowded, they started to inbreed, and I'm going to talk more about breeding in a sec, and then they went out from that region. Now, she made it very clear, and in our interview, she went backwards and back quite a few times and talked about the beginning place of all people and got crowded and moved out. Now, we had thought that all the different art styles we found in that region, and we found all of them. We found Wandjina, we found Lightning Brothers, we found Mimis. I had thought, and we'd all thought, that it had come in and been stored. And what Arnie Bev said, no, it started there and went out. So that started to make me think, okay, maybe, just maybe, the whole of this region, this particular region, is a genesis place, a place where all things begin.
So in the same sense that we were talking before about leaving here and going to Egypt and taking a particular style of glyph with them to Egypt, from this central point in Gosford, it might have been family tribes that went off into different areas and took a style with them.
Exactly.
Spread out around the country.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to keep referring to Arnie Bev and David Fitzgerald, the two people who did this interview, because I always take my first guidance from the original people. She went a bit further. She actually said that, and I remember exactly what she said. She said, you know, the glyphs at Gosford, and she validated them as being Egyptian. And it's fascinating. She'd never spoke about it before. She said, you do realise there's older forms of glyphs, and she called it writing. And we did. We know of two others. We've seen them. We've filmed one, which was in the documentary, and I've got photographs of another. And then she made an amazing point. She said, they're not Egyptian, they're ours. We wrote first. We taught them hieroglyphs. Mm. Now, that started to make me think. And since I spoke to you, I sat down and I went back and looked at the glyphs anew. I was like, okay, let's look at the glyphs again, and let's work on the assumption, yes, there is Proto-Egyptian there, and yes, there is the story about the Egyptian part of this, but could it be that a lot of this story is written by a much more ancient hand and from another inspiration, but from this region? And that's what we started to look at. Now, what I'd like to do is, before I actually go through the process, and I've got a few pictures I put somewhere, and believe me, I will find them eventually. I'll write them down somewhere. And as usual, I've misplaced. Oh, no, I haven't. I will. What I'd like to do first is I want to basically validate the Gosford glyphs. I want to explain in that interview Until I'd heard that interview, I had the glyphs right down the bottom of our evidence, but after that it became number one. I want to explain to everyone that doesn't understand or is not aware of what took place with the glyphs what the official line is. Now, if you go and contact the National Parks and Wildlife, they will tell you, and they sent a professor to have a look at it in the late 80s, and he said they're 12 months old. Done and dusted. That's when they're supposed to be done. There are two other theories. The second one was in the mid-1980s, Sydney Uni students snuck up there in the dead of night and camped out there for weeks on end and created the whole facade. And the third one is that and I'm going to use the words that have been used by others, not me, a deranged Yugoslav was found by a gentleman by the name of Valandash in either 1982 or 1975, I can never be sure, and it is vague, and he walked out of there with a chisel in hand, and he did it. Now, they were the stories. Let me now share with you what we found out in the interview with the two people who should know the most about it. Now, Arnie Bev, I spoke about, is a Darking Young Elder. David Fitzgerald was actually a contractor for National Parks and Wildlife and became the sort of unofficial sites officer. And he was in contact with the Glyphs in 1978. Now, this is very important because with the exception of one story, which is that maybe the deranged Czech was there in 1975, every other story of a hoax is in the 80s. Now, this is what happened. He was working for the National Parks and Wildlife and heard about the glyphs. And the interview goes something like this. He actually bribed one of the people there to show them the glyphs. And he had to bribe them by finding another site and saying, I will not show you that site, an Aboriginal site, unless you show me that site. A bit like you show me, I'll show you. And he goes into the way he bartered and got negotiation to get this site. He was taken there right at dusk. He was told not to tell a person about this. As he put it, it was all cloak and dagger, and he was told, don't say a word. Now, the important part of this story is, when he got there, he said that the two walls were basically covered in between them were tons and tons of rubbish. Rocks, trees, bushfires. It said it took him, under the direction of National Parks and Wildlife and some co-workers, 2 full days to clear the walls of all the rubbish that was between them. Now, bear in mind, the earliest hoax story is less than 1,000 days before, and they're supposed to walk straight between the walls and seen everything. And here's the National Parks and Wildlife in 1978 spending 2 full days to clear the thing up. And as they cleared it up, David then started to see all the hieroglyphs. All he could see was the top layer until they pulled it all away. And that was the beginning of the glyphs. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a second part to this story which is ever so important. One of the major complaints about the glyphs is, and if you've seen them, and I think you have, haven't you, Lisa?
No, I haven't been up there yet.
Oh, sorry. Well, one of the major complaints is, and it's a valid complaint, there is very little rock varnish there, which there should be. That's part of archaeology. When you make something, varnish grows over it. And secondly, some of the glyphs look like they were done 40 years ago, not 4,000 years ago. Both very valid comments. But Arnie Bev and David Fitzgerald sorted both of those out in the interview. Number one, I didn't know this. The whole of the glyphs was covered in a rock roof all the way across, and that goes about 15 metres. What we are walking on today, when I walk on it, it always sounded hollow. Now I know why. It fell in. There's still one part of the roof that's still there. The rest of it fell into the floor. Mm-hmm. And that covered the glyphs. So for the 4,000 years, up until 40 years ago, the whole of those 2 walls were completely sealed off from nature and the elements. And secondly, more importantly, Arnie Bev let away something I'd never heard before. She said, oh, yes, we knew they were Egyptian. They're not ours. They're not sacred. They belong to them. But the women would go up to the wall and clean each of the glyphs with women's urine. That's why we don't have the varnish. That's why it's so clean. Now, if it's cleaned all the time with women's urine and it's completely sealed with a rock wall, a rock roof rather, we have a valid understanding and reason why it looks so new. The same way when you go into the pyramids. The engravings there look new, don't they? No one says, oh, they were done 40 years ago, because they know they were protected. So were these. And those two pieces of information made me realise straight away, okay, the glyphs are legitimate. And that changes everything, because it refutes all of the sort of hoaxes theories. And the last one about Sydney Uni, David said, oh, yes, that part is a little bit true. What he said was he then took some people he trusted up to the glyphs, because he wasn't going to listen to National Parks and Wildlife, who, by the way, you will find in the interview, decided to destroy the site. They were going to seal up the entrance and fence it off. And it was only because somebody within Parks and Wildlife, and I can't mention their name because there's legal issues there, stonewalled them and stopped them. But the idea was they were going to just seal the whole thing off. They wanted nothing to do with it. And I did ask him at the time, did anyone say they were fake? And he said no. So what we now know is they are legitimate. So now we went back. And the other complaint has been there's two hands there, two styles. And the hoaxers made an issue of that. And you know what? They're right. There are. There's the style we know about, which is the Egyptian one. Then there's the more ancient one. Now, last time, Lisa, I spoke about the fact that there were quite a few UFOs there. Mm. What I'd like to do today, I don't know how well this works, is I'd like to actually show you what they look like. I can hold up a piece of paper. Tell me whether you can see it. Can you see that?
Yes, very well.
Right. The ones at the top are the UFOs that are on the wall. And there's two more I didn't include, but I think they are. Down below is anyone who believes they're legitimate. That's their interpretation, that it must be jewelry.
Okay.
I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence by saying that if anyone claims they're the same, it's a pack of lies. There's nothing in common. And these 8 are all different. When you do a jewelry icon, you do the same thing each time. So we knew about that from before, okay? We knew that was the case. What I'd like to do today is to go into the next part of the reading. And this is the part which I call very, very disturbing for me to even mention this. But I'm absolutely adamant that wall is basically a testimonial the Pleiadians put in there about the beginning of the Homo sapien race. I believe that within that wall we can find the full story of how they actually genetically modified and engineered humanity.
So let's hang on. Let's just put this into perspective. You're saying that the glyphs could very well be the oldest and perhaps the original historical record of how life came to this planet.
Exactly. And this is I'm going to make the point again. I walked this path with the greatest reluctance, but I needed to set this up by going through a bit of the stuff we did before to get there. And then I'll try and show you what happened after that happened. But for now,
hang on. Can I just ask one more question? Are you saying it was written by the Pleiadians themselves?
That's what I'm saying. When Arnie Bev said we have older writing here, right? I have no doubt they have older writing. My question is, and this is only my theory, I am not saying that anyone said this. I'm thinking to myself, okay, we've got older writing there. Who gave them that inspiration? And when I look in that wall on the Gosford Glyphs, I can see how that came about. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold up the very first section. I'm going to hold a piece of paper here, and I'm going to try and take you through this step by step. I'm going to hold it up like this, and I'll start at the top, and I'll just run the paper up and down. First, there's me above it. And the ones I've actually put a marker around, see how I've put little dots around those?
Okay.
To mark. Those are not Proto-Egyptian glyphs. Now, I have no doubt Ray Johnson's right. There is Proto-Egyptian there, and this is where Proto-Egyptian begins. But my argument is the part about the two brothers, and I'll show you that part is separate. It is correctly aligned, and I could recognise 92% of the glyphs around there straight away as Proto-Egyptian.
Now, Proto-Egyptian is the oldest known form of Egyptian glyph, right?
From the rest, the other 270, I recognise less than 50% as Proto-Egyptian, and 1/3 I couldn't recognise at all. There was nothing close. Now, Hans Dieter von Senth, when he wrote his paper based on Ray's work, admitted that there was a lot of glyphs he left out, And he also said, what I've done is taken an unknown glyph and an unknown glyph and put together a meaning. So they both admitted a lot of this didn't make sense. What I was focusing on was not the Proto-Egyptian, which I understood. I wanted to work out what the stuff is that they didn't understand. And this is what I'd like to share with you now. And I'll try and take you through this very quickly.
Okay.
Glyph here. There is no glyph like
Stickman.
that. Stickman. Egyptians don't do stickman. They always have a body and a torso. They have some features there to denote what it's like, and they always do profile. I look upon that as a universal sign for man. Alongside, we have this glyph here. You see the 3 circles there with a leg on top? That one, there is no glyph like that in the book. But I think it's important I use the Proto-Egyptian manual because obviously Proto-Egyptian came out of this. So therefore, there's going to be similarities. So I went through the whole of the book, and 2,800, there is one glyph that has 3 circles, the only one there, 3 round circles, and it represents chemical or mineral. If you stand 3 circles on top of one another and put legs on it, I started to think, well, what could that be? What have we got there? Okay. Now, further along there, you'll see this signal here. See the one with the 3 points on the top?
Hang on, keep the paper still for a sec.
Yes, sorry. You got that one, the 3 on top, just there.
Yes.
That represents an etheric region. But etheric region is the most spiritual place, and it's obviously Australia, and it's next to the glyph we spoke about before, the crystal spaceship, but I didn't mention that above. Etheric region normally has 2 points. This one has 3. I'm assuming this crystal spaceship is landing in the etheric region, which I think is Gosford. Now, when we go down a bit more, you will notice there's a development. Did you notice now that the 3-figured man, the 3-circled person now has legs? And arms.
And arms. It has arms now, yes.
It's grown. It's got bigger. Now, to the side, I'll hold this up. You will see below there's another one of these people further down again. 2 legs, 2 arms. Mm-hmm. Again, looking like we've got 1, 2, 3 of something that's been created. But have a look at this one here. Can you see the 3 circles that are in the right alignment?
Yes.
And then half splits the center of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the beginning of a genetic manipulation? Is that where they're actually showing us how they broke this particular chemical down?
So what does that staff that's going through the 3 circles normally mean?
It means scepter, a sacred scepter. Remember the shaft of Tet. Mm-hmm. Isis had a shaft of Tet, which could break the laws of nature. Here we have a shaft running straight through the line there, which gives me the indication, what have we got there? Is this the beginning of some sort of being we're creating? Now, if I can also share with you the glyphs I do recognise because they're equally important to go around there. Those 2 flag glyphs, if you can see them, they represent God. This glyph here represents majesty. And this one up here with the snake represents Father. So around this, I've got God, majesty, and Father. And then I've got these little people with arms and legs, and I've got that one there. And I'm starting to think, am I reading a story here? And to the side, we have the glyph 4 coming from the stars. So there's that inference again, and there's the star there again. So I've got the place they've come from, the place they've come from there, and we seem to be having a story there, or something's taking place. Mm-hmm. But there's more. Beneath again is, I think, one of the most important glyphs on the whole thing, which is that one there. Can you see that strange being again? But this time there's an ellipse in the middle.
My immediate thought is a pregnant woman.
Well, brilliant, because what they've written it as, Hans and Ray have written this down as endurance. Now, there's endurance there. Endurance has the ellipse on the top, 2 circles underneath and the leg. That's not endurance. It can't be, because the Egyptian scribes aren't that stupid. They know where the ellipse is supposed to be. That looks to me like exactly what you said, pregnant woman. And then we have this strange construction.
So the bottom one, the endure or endurance, that's a known Proto-Egyptian glyph?
Proto-Egyptian.
Right.
This to me is not endurance, it's pregnant. Whether that particular woman is an Aboriginal woman bearing this genetic creation or whether it's an alien woman bearing a genetic, I don't know. But it certainly looks very, very pregnant to me. And then to the side, we have the most amazing glyph there. I have no idea what it is, and I'm going to guess, could it be a laboratory? So what I'm starting to see there is, I see of those, there are 14 of the 28 glyphs there that are unidentifiable, nothing close. So 50% of these are not Proto-Egyptian. Now, the ones that are, and I've also got the Sphinx here again, so I've got Egypt up there. The ones that are give me a setting. And the setting seems to be Egypt, Australia, some sort of god, some sort of magnificent being, and around it I've got all this creation. So I'm starting to look at that story and say to myself, this seems to be, since it's the opening passage of the whole of this story, this seems to tell me something. It seems to be telling me here, I've got genetic creation here. I've got the creation of a new species. That species, I believe, is Homo sapiens sapien. So that was the first thing I started to look at with that. I started to think, okay, fine, well, what does all that mean? So now what I'd like to show you is another part of the wall. Now that I'm reading this separately, I wanted to look at another part of this wall and work out, okay, have I got this right? Could it possibly be beings from above, or being the people who create this? I mentioned this one before, but I haven't shown this, and I want you to look at this one here. This is quite fascinating because I believe this tells us exactly what happened. Now, it's from this side here, and it's fascinating.
Can you move it over a little bit? Because I think we're missing the first one. The spaceship. It starts with the spaceship, yeah?
Starts this way and runs across like that.
Yep.
Now, why read this as being, and most people have decided to read it from that point on. They've left that out. Spaceship, direction, spaceship. This is supposed to be holy. This person is incredibly holy. That's about as sacred an Egyptian icon as you can get. I think he's directing the spaceship. Now, why I say this is a spaceship, do you remember I said that a crystal, and I'll just stop for a sec. A crystal icon is a rectangle with 4 inverted V's and 4 lines down the bottom. And that's basically how I got the crystal spaceship here, right? In this one, look what's been turned side over there.
Can you pull the paper down a little bit?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Up.
No, down.
Yeah.
That's it.
Beautiful. You will see there's the rectangle, there's 2 V's and 3 lines. If the spaceship is supposed to shatter when it hit the atmosphere, is that the spaceship broken up into pieces?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Now, there at the finish, we have the last UFO, which is the most stunning of all of them.
And a lot bigger than the first one.
It's huge. It's huge. Now, is that the escape pod? And what's more important is that Dr. Hands, and bless him, because they're in the right track by saying it's Proto-Egyptian, says, what they've done here is added 4 extra arms to increase luminescence. No, scribes don't have that poetic license. If you are supposed to be a scribe working for Nefer Degeb, you don't decide, well, I might just add a bit here and add a bit there. No, hieroglyphs are standardized so you can read them. It's not as if you write a letter and say, I'm not going to do A anymore. I'm going to put something around it to make something new. We can't read it anymore. No, that's not what it is. What I think this is a story of the crash, where they came from, the direction there, and the final crash. And I think that is what took place. Okay, so we think that we've got a story here of something quite amazing. But now reading this story again, now reading all the walls again, I know it's a bit rough holding up the pictures, but it's the only way it can work, sort of. I now want to tell you about, once the Pleiadians got here, what took place. And that's in the walls too. That's also in the walls. And it's given to me with 3 more glyphs. And I'll hold them up again. The first, the second set, and the third. The ones on this side are on the wall. Okay. Now, the first one there, which is sort of like an oblong with a line down the centre, not in the book. It's not in the book. But as I said before, knowing that Proto-Egyptian comes out of this language, there should be clues, and there are. There are 2 others in the book, and there they are, this one and this one. And if you mix those 2 together, what do you get? You get there. Now, let me read what the 2 say. 1923. The first one there is prehistoric building. 1951, ancient ruins, ancient city. So on that wall, I think that is a testimony is, yes, we landed here and we stayed. Because the ship crashed, and if it crashed and it's a spaceship, now if it's a boat and it leaks, you put a plank of wood on and off you go. But if it's a spaceship, you can't put a plank of wood on, you're stuck. Now, I then thought, okay, if that's the case, I should find more. There should be more than one statement saying we stayed here, and there is. I'll direct you to these two here. These two are found on the wall. In fact, that one is on top of that one, so they must go together.
Right.
This one is Proto-Egyptian, and it means street. Street. How many streets were there in Australia before 1770 or 1788? There wasn't a street.
There wasn't any.
But this wall, there is a street. Now, underneath is the important one. Now, Hans has said this is the Land's End and part of the narrative of the two brothers getting stranded at Land's End. The problem is Land's End is that, a cross, no circle at all. Wrong. Cannot be that. They put the circle in because it was meant to be there. And if you look to the side, you will find two other glyphs there that have a different meaning. And both of these do have circles. Yes, that one's slightly sloped, and this one does have the right alignment, but there's curved lines there. Let me read what those two say. The one with the curved lines says town, village, hamlet. This one here says city, settlement. I'm thinking, hang on for a sec, if I put them together, what have I got? I've got streets and a settlement. More of that story. And then the last one, because there are 3, maybe 4 stories about how they live there, which is this one here. Can you see if you can see that?
Yep.
Now, some people, it was read as something like fort. No.
It was read as something what? Fort.
A fort, a castle, a building of some sort. That is a fort. And you'll notice it's got 4 sides and ramparts all the way around to protect it. Mm-hmm. This has 2 open sides here. Why? Because they were living at a place in cooperation. There was no conflict. There was no need to fortress themselves away from the Aboriginal people because they were cooperating together. So what I seem to be reading there, pardon me, is that they were here. They genetically modified and created a new species called Homo sapien sapien.
So what were the Aboriginal people at that time then? What would they have been classified as?
It's a wonderful question because you remember, I'm going to make the point here. Going down this genetic manipulation line is a theory. It's our theory. I'm not saying the elders have said this. When the elders say this is the beginning place, and if I can read from an Adam Arthur elder, he said, this is the centre, the creation place. Everything drifted away from here, which is exactly what Arnie Bev said. Martin, a Pitjantjatjara man, said everything began here and everything will end here and begin again here. This is a common theory.
Is he talking about the Gosford area specifically or Australia?
Statements from other elders from elsewhere talking about Australia being the beginning place. Right. What I'm being specific is I'm going with Arnie Bev and saying, yes, it is, but let's find the place within Australia where it began. I'm going one step further. The genetic line I'm taking, I'm saying to you now, I'm not saying that anyone has actually come up to me and said we've been genetically manipulated by Pleiadian ancestors, but they have all said our ancestors are Pleiadian. So therefore what they are telling me is there is a genetic link. Mm. What I'm trying to work out is how could that be? I'm trying to read between the lines there. So I'm not saying that I've been specifically said. No one's come up to me and said, oh, we're genetically modified or something like that. What they've said is our ancestors come from Pleiades and we are Pleiadian. But I would suggest to you that if they are Pleiadian, if they are, there would have had to be modifications made when they got to the Earth. And maybe those modifications involve them deciding, okay, then we will merge and we'll become, and they will become Homo sapiens in a way that can fix it up. The process, whether there were people here to begin with, I'll talk about that in a sec because there is a theory about that and we'll get to that in a sec, but I wanted to set up that particular part of that first. So that's what we seem to be reading in that story. But there's a bit more to it. the sky heroes. In the region around Gosford, the reason we got involved so much with that region was because we were finding Egyptian stories all over the place. And we're finding one god, probably one of the greatest Egyptian gods, Thoth, the god of wisdom. We found Thoth and Duramulin merged into one figure. Now,
who's Duramulin?
Duramulin is the son of the greatest sky hero by army, the first creation spirit. And his son, remember the word son, is called Duramulin, and he's in the rock. Now, Duramulin I can recognise because he's got a club foot and the other leg is longer. And we always find that. But we find in Gosford, we find Duramulin bodies, and then we find ibis heads in profile and monkey heads in profile, which is Thoth. We found an Ankh with an ibis footprint alongside. So we know Thoth is about in that region. And what we also found is Thoth 2 kilometres from the glyphs. Now, that's really important. And that's the picture of Thoth 2 kilometres from the glyphs.
Can you pull it down a little?
Yes.
Ooh.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
They call him Bulgandri. And it's well known in the region. They call this particular gentleman Bulgandri.
But hang on, the people who are looking at this who are familiar with images of Thoth will look at that and go, how is that Thoth?
Ah, good. Because, look, if I was to show you, if I can, here's a picture of, I'll try and find, here's one here. I've got a couple of pictures here. Here's the sort of stuff I was talking about before. There's Bulgandri and Thoth together.
Can't make that out.
Sorry. Oh, how about this one on this side? Can you see that one?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right. You'll see one foot's longer than the other. There's a club foot there. That's Bulgandri at the bottom. And up the top, you'll see the ibis head and you'll see it in profile. Okay. That's the same on this one, but you can't see it. Now, that looks like Thoth. This one doesn't. It looks like an Aboriginal spirit doing weird things. But I want you to look at it more carefully. Look at 4 things on there. Number 1, if you can, look at that thing in the middle. That's supposed to be, according to National Parks and Wildlife, a woomera. Auntie Minnie Mace, who walked on the site with Ray Johnson, was on site the first time that he went there, told me about this. And he said, National Parks and Wildlife call this an Aboriginal person. And this is what they say. They say that is a woomera and that is a shield.
What's a woomera?
A woomera is what throws spears. This, by proportion, is 5 foot long, which means the spears he's throwing are 15 foot. If that's a shield, it's the worst shield on this planet. Don't deflect a thing. Auntie Minnie Mace told me this. That is the sun.
That is the moon. Yeah.
And that is an Egyptian broadsword, not a woomera. And that is an Egyptian headdress. And below is an 8-metre boat to represent his craft. This is Egyptian. This is Egyptian. She made that very clear. Okay. I thought, okay, that's an Egyptian. I first thought it's an Egyptian warrior. That was my opinion. Auntie Minnie didn't tell me what it was. She wasn't sure. She only knew it was a very, very important Egyptian god, person or something. Quite recently, and I'll tell you why this is so important, I got a piece of information from the Book of Hermes. Hermes is the reincarnation of Thoth. Same thing, okay? And I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to read the passage word for word. And I want you to, while I'm doing that, I'm going to hold this up and see if you can pick something up. Indeed, the appearance of the sun and moon are omniform, rather like our mirrors that produce the likeness through reflection in brilliance. The importance of this mirror reflection and the duality of the suns I have already told of the mirror reflection of the moon. Now, he holds the sun and the moon. He's Egyptian. Is it Thoth? I'll tell you why it is Thoth. It is Thoth because he says his wisdom is written in reverse. One of the major complaints about the Gosford Glyphs is so much of it is written in reverse. And the theory was these so-called Sydney Uni students, which, by the way, did go up there with David Fitzgerald in 1984. He took them up there. And yes, they did scratch into the actual wall. One of them put their fingernails on it and started to scratch away the varnish. And David said, "What the hell are you doing?" "I'm just trying to scratch away the varnish." She said, "Get out of here." So the Sydney Uni students did go there and they did chisel with a fingernail once. So there is something in there. Now, what they claim is this. They claim when the Sydney Uni students went there, they got the glyphs back the front. They copied it off something and put the cartouches back the front. Because 3 of the 4 cartouches, now cartouches are the things that are covered in rectangles and really important statements. One is the right way around. That's the story about the Egyptian brothers. And it is all the right way around. And all around it are 92% of glyphs we know. The other 3 are the wrong way around. Now, they said it was a mistake of Sydney Uni students. Can I put it to you? These Sydney Uni students are so deceitful and so unprofessional as to scratch out in the bush and do all this. Don't you think after they put the first glyph up, because all 3 glyphs have got birds, but around those cartouches are birds facing the right way. These birds are facing the wrong way. Don't you think after they did the first one, if they're students from Sydney Uni, they would have said, "Oh my God, we've stuffed up the first one. Let's get the last 2 cartouches right and get them around the right way." No, they got it wrong 3 times. There are other signs there. The death is back to front. There are things back to front. Is that the wisdom of Thoth? Because remember what I read before from the book of Hermes. He said that his wisdom would be written in mirror reflection. My statement is Thoth, 2 kilometres away, is directing us towards the glyphs to say this is our wisdom. And the older part of this story, there are 4 cartouches. The 3 that are reversed, I think, are from the aliens, from the Pleiadians. The one that's the right way around is from the right people. Now, if these Sydney Uni students needed to make 3 mistakes before they finally worked at the 4th time, "Oh, God, we've got the cartouches wrong, let's put it around the right way." They're now our archaeologists wandering around the country now. That's what we've got looking after us now. I wouldn't take any notice of all of them. Or is it? But the reason they were written in reverse, because this is the wisdom of Thoth. This is the wisdom of the Pleiadians. Because don't forget, we are talking about sky heroes here. So we think this is the beginning place. And we think the Pleiadians did come here. And that wall, those 2 walls, could be one of the most important archaeological sites, not in Australia, but in the world. Because the Pleiadians left a testimonial of their presence, of their activities, and of course, 2 things that we need to put into this story is we have now found another. And I haven't got pictures of this yet because we're sorting this out at the moment. On our last time up, and I hadn't mentioned this before too, not close to the glyphs, but about 30 k's around, I think we found a marker as to when the Pleiadians came, a date. And it's the only one we've got. Let me explain this site. I'm going to be very careful because I don't want to give away too much about it because we know exactly where it is. This gentleman took me up to this site last time I went down there. And he told me, I thought, this can't be right what he's told me. But anyway, what he described was this, a perfectly engraved circle. And I mean perfect, like you could not have made a better circle, engraved into the hardest rock you're ever going to find, and 8 lines, all 45 degrees, 45 degrees, 45 degrees, all the way around, and all perfectly straight. That's geometry at the highest level, and Aboriginal people do not do that sort of stuff. So, well, this is going to be interesting. So we saw it, and there it was. I swear to you, you would have had to have a template to get that circle any better than it was. And these lines were something like 85 centimetres long, 85 centimetres long, 84 centimetres long, 83. There was like a gradation there. And here's the interesting part. This gentleman took a lecturer from Newcastle Uni, civil engineering, to look at it. And he said, I don't think we could do this today. The cuts into the rock went down at 90 degrees, across at 180, and straight back up again. The finest cuts you would ever imagine, like some sort of machine has just cut straight down and taken a rectangle out. You could not get straighter lines. I had a look at each one of those lines and the circle. It was going straight down at 90 degrees, and down the bottom was perfectly flat, like something had chiseled it out. He says, we could do this. This is what I've been told. We would need to do it with laser technology in a laboratory. This is out in the bush. The fascinating part of this story is it's obviously a compass, and it actually has an N on one side pointing to the north. What is amazing is if it was done in the last 200 years, because it wasn't done by Aboriginal people, if it was done by Europeans, and this guy says we couldn't do it, but let's just assume for one bizarre second we did. Why is it if they spent days chiseling into the hardest rock you could ever imagine, is north 45 degrees off? If they that trouble, you don't think they would have put the compass alongside and aligned it correctly? No, north is 45 degrees off where it is now. Now, here's the trick. 45 degrees off, you have to have basically a complete shift. A shift from north to south and south to north. So the North Pole becomes the South Pole and the South Pole becomes the North Pole. When does that happen? Twice in the last million years. It happened 40,000 years ago for a brief period of time, for a 2,000-year gap from 38 to 40,000 years. So that's a possibility. It could be that. All right. The time before, the major time that happened, when we had a huge shift in the Earth's polarity, was 780,000 years to 800,000 years ago. That's the last time we had a shift like that. So what I'm looking at there is I'm looking at, and there's other stuff I can't even mention. There's more around of a technology that's way beyond what the Aboriginal people could ever do. I can tell you now, that compass is not Aboriginal. There is a 1% chance it could have been done by a European with technology that we can't even take out on the field today. But sure, someone might have done it. But if they were that advanced and had technology like that, they couldn't read a compass. That's pathetic. Well, it's just not true. And there's other stuff around I can't mention that we're working with at the moment. So what that tells me is there's something going on here. There's something of quite amazing dimensions that's taking place in that region. And when Arnie Bev says this is the beginning place and we went out from here when it became overpopulated, we inbred, and she used the word inbred, and I'm thinking, oh, there's that breeding word again. We went out. Did it begin here? Did the Pleiadians, because she said there's two forms of writing. We've got the older one. Did they get that from them? Was that part of the heritage the Pleiadians gave the Aboriginal people, who are the direct descendants of the Pleiadians? So that becomes the first part of this story.
So there was something you were going to get back to in regards to the Aboriginal people, about when I asked the question, who were they then at this time?
Yes, actually, thank you, because being a male, we can think of one thing at a time, so I'm glad you did that, because I would have never remembered what it was. Yeah. Okay. What were they? Okay, here's the trick. Now I'm going to go to pure science. I'm going to go to white fella science now. We've done enough black fella science. Let's do what the white fellas have got to talk about this. And there is an answer. There is an answer. And I'll start by going back to the people that gave us the theory we all believe in today. And let's repeat what it is. No, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. What happened was around about 50 to 60,000 years ago, some Africans wandered out of Africa, made their way across the whole of Asia, landed near Indonesia, India, somewhere, set sail across the ocean, couldn't see land because you can't. And after 4 or 5 days, they sailed to Australia, right? That's the theory we've got. Every book says that, right? And we can thank Professor I forgot his first name now. Oh, it is Alan Wilson, Professor Alan Wilson and Professor Rebecca Can. They gave us Eve out of Africa 150,000 years ago. Homo sapiens began in Africa. Okay, I think that's the one we all know about. They're the ones who worked that out. I've read their paper. I want to tell you, in their paper, they say this, that Eve probably came out of Africa. Never said did, but every book says did. They said probably. Now, what was fascinating, they wrote that paper in about 1980, and that went around the world. And it starts something like this. After 25 years of argument between the paleontologist and the archaeologist, we've got it right and they've got it wrong. It was a pronouncement of victory. We won the argument. This is what happened. Eve started around about 150 to 180,000 years ago in Africa, and then around about 60,000 years, Homo sapien came out. That's the story. Therefore, all Aboriginal people are Homo sapiens that came from Africa. What people don't know is both those people said, we're wrong. Both those people within 10 years said it wasn't Africa, it wasn't probably Africa, it was definitely Australia. Now,
they've actually gone on the record since writing that theory and mentioning Australia.
Let me tell you how they came to that conclusion. And here's a date, and these are the people that the Aboriginal people may have come out of, okay? What they said was this. Rebecca Cann said, okay, you see, when they came up with 150,000 years, that date, what people don't know, it was based solely on Australia. That's how they got the date of 150,000 years. They did it like this. They said, okay, the Aboriginal people of Australia got there 50,000 years ago and have 1/3, and I'm going to use a word here and I'll explain, I've used it before, mitochondrial DNA diversity of the Africans. Therefore, because mitochondrial DNA comes from the woman, your side of the family, and it mutates once every 3,500 years, so you can use it as a timing mechanism. And they said, okay, if the Africans got to Australia 50,000 years ago, and they got 1/3 the genetic diversity, 3 times 150 or 3 times 50 or 3 times 60, 180 to 150,000 years. That's how they got their dates. So what Rebecca Cann did was, at that stage, she decided, I better double check. So she went and collected blood samples of 26 Indigenous groups around the world and compared them and got a shock, a huge shock. And what she said was, I got it wrong. She came up with this. She said that the group with the most genetic diversity were the Australian Aboriginals. I got it around the wrong way. And she even gave a timeline. And this is a timeline you're going to hear a fair few times. She said that the Australian Aboriginals came into existence 400,000 years ago. Then the Asians 100,000 years ago. And then finally, last and least, and I'm going to use those words deliberately, Europeans and Africans 40,000 years ago. The problem was Rebecca Cann is a woman and the junior partner. Does that mean much to the mainstream? Not a thing. They just dismissed it. Oh, rubbish, that can't be right. Alan Wilson decided, okay, because I better check this. What will I do? I'll go to Australia. And she came down here with a very famous archaeologist still around today called Mark Stoneking. And they went and sampled the mitochondrial DNA of Australian Aboriginals. And what they did was this. They found 22, and I'm going to use the word full descent. I don't use full blood, half caste. That's rubbish. I'm using the word full descent because I didn't want white genes tainting their sampling. So they found 22, yeah, that's right, 22 full descent Aboriginal people and found 15 different strands of mitochondrial DNA. He looked at that and said, that's 70% mutation rate. That's phenomenal. That's much larger than anyone else. When he got that reading, he came down in 1985 and then came down, 1987. When he got that reading, came straight back to Australia again and did it another time and got another 10 people from elsewhere and found 7 different areas, 7 mutations again. Now, here's the problem. You add 22, you get 22 now. Now, 22 times 3,500 is 77,000 years old. 30 people. He then said, what if I test more? Will it stay at 70%? And then he decided, I got it wrong. And this is what he said, and I think I know this one back to front, word for word. This was put out in 1989. He said, while Homo erectus was muddling around in the rest of the world, a few Homo erectus did something dramatically different and got to Australia. And it wasn't with stone tools, but it was here. They evolved free from competition, and it's here the first Homo sapiens came into fruition. And it's from here Homo sapiens went out into the rest of the world. He also said this happened around 400,000 years ago. So both people are saying around 400,000 years ago, Homo erectus got to Australia. That's a minimum date. Okay? Now, these two guys, and here's the problem. You would have thought when Alan Wilson makes a statement like that in 1989, since he came up with the out of Africa theory, you would have thought the academics would have thought, oh, hang on for a sec, we best change. But they didn't.
So when he comes out in 1980 and says out of Africa, they all jump on it and make it official. And when he comes out in 1989 and says, sorry, got it wrong, it's out of Australia, they just say, well, shut up.
Well, it was convenient. He went and died 6 months later, and that shut him up anyway, didn't
Oh, right.
and start pushing this big time. He died straight after he said this. Therefore, there's nobody to own it and then take it out and then say, oh, my name is Alan Wilson. I'm actually the head professor at Berkeley University. I'm saying this. He's
Under
dead.
suspicious circumstances, by any chance?
I don't know about I didn't listen till you said that. I don't know. But remember when I said 800,000 years with that? There's something they left out. You see, when Wilson died, he died in 1990, right? 9 years later, Michael Morwood was scratching around a place called Flores, where the little people are, the hobbits are. You've probably heard about them, the ones they found up there, the tiny people, and they've been around for a long time.
Where were they found, sorry?
Flores.
Where's that?
Flores, it's an island near Indonesia, right?
Now, you're cutting out a little bit. Near Indonesia?
Yeah, near Indonesia.
Okay.
Am I still there?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay, right. He found the little people, and that was big time. But that wasn't the biggest discovery. There was one bigger. It was this. 900,000 years ago, he claimed Homo erectus sailed to Flores. Now, Flores is 22 kilometres from Indonesia, from the Indonesian mainland, the main islands there, and cannot be reached other than by boat. It is never, that gap is huge and it's never been joined up. He said that Homo erectus sailed to Flores 900,000 years ago.
What's he basing that on?
Eh?
What's he basing that date on?
Because they found tools made by humans, Homo erectus tools. They could be Homo sapien, by the way. We don't know for sure about that. He used Homo erectus because Homo sapiens only been around for 60,000 years. He couldn't use that. So he said Homo erectus. We found tools with megafauna that has been extinct for that period of time. In fact, the date has never been challenged by archaeologists. In fact, I think if you read Josephine Flood's book, Archaeology of the Dreamtime, it's in Stop Press, and she calls it the most reliable form of dating. It's never been challenged. The date is fine. 900,000 years has never been challenged. What we need to understand is this. Whether it was Homo erectus or Homo sapien, it was a population that stayed and flourished, which means you've got to have more than 20 people to stop inbreeding. More importantly, we know they were actually fishing from the water and also hunting on the mainland because we found remains there, alongside there. Here's the trick. If they sailed, I don't care where they came from, 900,000 years ago, you need to understand once Flores gets filled up, if they keep going south, let's say they came from Indonesia and sailed across there, the next island they will reach if they keep going south is Timor. And guess what's after Timor if you keep going south?
You hit Australia. Yeah.
Australia. So 900,000 years ago, these people, whether Homo erectus or Homo sapien, have built a boat that could carry 20 people across 22 kilometres of ocean. I put it to you, how many improvements do you need to make that boat sail 60 kilometres to Timor and 100 to Australia? If you can do 22 and seat 20 people, I don't think you've got to change it much at all. And then you've got a complete base. So there you go. We got 900,000 years ago, we got people of some sort in a boat. Now, my question is, did they come from Australia to... I was
just going to say, how do you know they went that way and not the other?
Let's go with where the majority say, the more convenient way. If they're saying they came from Indonesia and sailed to Flores, they've got 500,000 years to work out how to get to Australia when they already know how to sail and they already know how to get people there. And here's another point. How do you convince people to get on a boat unless you've got language? How do you get 22 people to sit on a boat or 20 people to get on a boat unless you've got language? We've got something going on there way back. I suspect that they were coming out of Australia and this was part of what was going on, and the little people were coming out with them, and that's why we found them in Flores too, because we've got little people here too. So we think that they were actually coming from Australia. Now, there's been another recent discovery, which I haven't mentioned before with Elisa, which actually proves our point, that they were sailing everywhere. And this happened 80,000 years ago. Have you heard about the Denisovans?
No, I don't think so.
Right, they've only just been discovered. They're a group of hominids, not Homo sapiens. Now, remember, according to the books, only Homo sapiens are in Australia. Remember that? Nothing else but Homo sapiens. That's what they tell us. Must be right because it's in a book and they've got degrees. The Denisovans are Siberian. They are not Homo sapien. They are a hominid, a different form of hominid we've only just discovered. And they got the finger of one of these people and they managed to extract mitochondrial DNA from it. These guys were around from 80,000 years to 30,000 years. Now, if the out of Africa theory is right, 80,000 years, they've got to be African, haven't they? No African genes there at all. But they did find a link. And guess where the link was? Australia.
Australia.
Okay. They have Australian mitochondrial DNA, and they're at least 80,000 years old, but they only came out of Africa 60,000 years ago. And these guys aren't Homo sapiens. Where did those genes come from? They came from Australia. I read an account where the explanation was, then they must have sailed from Siberia to Australia. I'm thinking, you guys are making it up as you go along now because you told me only Homo sapiens sailed to other continents. Now we've got this lesser species sailing from Siberia to Australia, of all places. Why didn't they stop somewhere else on the way? But no, straight to Australia across all the ocean. Rubbish. The Australian people are sailing all over the place. And as Arnie Bev said, and I know this for a fact, as I gave you other ones, this is the centre. People drifted away from here. This was the beginning place, and then they went to other places. The Denisovians, are they an earlier form of genetic modelling? Are there other forms of modelling that came out of here? Are there different forms of hominids that are all coming out of this place here? I'm not denying for 1 second there are hominids in Africa. I'm not denying that for a second. And they go back a long time. They go back millions and millions of years, and they are in Africa. But are there new species being developed in Australia that are modern, more advanced than these other species?
Hang on, I'm trying to put all of this together in my own head. So we've got perhaps a prehistoric hominid that may well be all over the planet, inhabiting the planet. Mm. Then we have the Palladians arrive. Mm-hmm. They start doing some genetic playing.
Yep.
Produce a particular species that then might have gone out and gone to Siberia. And as they continue to play and continue to evolve, each time we end up with a new form of hominid. Until we end up with what? Us.
Homo sapiens. I don't know when the Homo sapiens came about. Then when they did genetic manipulation, you know yourself, when you do something new to begin with, you're going to get different variants on it. I'm not sure. I am sure the Denisovians are definitely Australian. I've got no doubt about that. Whether they are an earlier form of genetic modelling or whether they created 4 or 5 different forms of hominid and included the Neanderthals, which have now been wiped out. But remember, the Neanderthals have a brain capacity of 240 cc bigger than us, so don't think we're the best. As Doctor Who said, I thought the Neanderthals would win. They were the poets. I thought they'd win instead of the cranky apes, which is us mob. They may have created different forms of hominid. I don't know. There were other forms of hominid out there to begin with. Maybe the Denisovans were one form and the Homo sapiens were another and the Neanderthals were another. I'm not sure. But I can tell you this. We do know that mitochondrial DNA links the Denisovians, the Siberians, who are at least 80,000 years old, back to Australia. And according to Wilson and Can, we can certainly point to Australia as the place where Homo sapiens begin. Those are what the scientists say, not what I say, what the scientists say. And if I can finish, and I'll leave all that stuff because it is pretty heavy, we have just finally did a genome sequence of an Aboriginal person. That was only done last year, in fact, this year, by a Danish group. And do you know what they found? We were told the Aboriginals were last. No, now they're equal first with the Africans. And the reason why they put the Africans in front of the Australians is because the research team said, well, the Australians got to Australia, the Africans got to Australia 50,000 years ago, and these guys were at least 75,000 years old, so the Africans must be first. And what they basically say was around 70,000 years ago, the Africans came out, Didn't stop in Asia because Asians don't start for 35,000 years. Went through the whole of Asia, didn't stop anywhere, didn't breed anywhere, went through the whole of Asia and went straight to Australia. That's their theory. And of course, I give them credit because they then said after saying that, our theory doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. They said this: why is it that the Australian Aboriginal people have a tool technology that is more primitive than the Africans and so different from the Africans? Wouldn't it be the same tool technology? Why did they change their tool technology and go backwards? They don't understand that. They said it doesn't make sense. And what they also said was, when they did this study, they also said you can't put geography there. So it was guesswork. So the genome sequencing puts the Africans and the Aboriginal people equal first. Well, it's not really equal first. The Africans come second. They come second. The Australian Aboriginal people come first because they went all over the place. So yes, the science now is coming up strongly, very strongly. If you remember, until that genome sequencing, the book said that the Aboriginal people were the last race to be created. Now they've put them first, according to the last piece of study ever been done. Now the Denisovians come apart, and they're 80,000 years old, and that's before the out of Africa theory again. So the science is telling us that humanity begins in Australia. The science has been telling us for a while. And Australia is really the square peg in a sea of round holes because it doesn't fit into the rest of the world, simply because it begins here. So that is what science is telling us today. It's quite difficult and it's quite complex, but trust me, that's what we're getting. And of course, in Australia, there are 9 different sites that have been dated by some archaeologists and argued by others, of course, that are past 60,000 years. Think of this, Lisa. Only one of them has to be right to disprove the out of Africa theory. Just one. One will do the trick for me. They've got to prove that all 9 of these sites that have been claimed by some to be over 60,000 years are wrong. They've got to get them all wrong. I only have to get one right. So there are so many problems with the out of Africa theory. And there's only one thing. And if I can close with this, Lake Mungo 3, dated at 62,000 years. They got mitochondrial DNA out of that particular person's bone. It's the oldest, by the way, it's the oldest Homo sapien on the planet, found in Australia. Oh, yeah. You won't find another Homo sapien anywhere else until 30,000 years ago. Everyone admits that. The oldest Homo sapien in Australia is found in Australia in the middle of the desert at 60,000 years. And don't forget, they're supposed to have got here 60,000 years landing up the top. What do? Burn their boat and run into the middle straight away? No, they're fishermen. I know what they would have done, lived on the coast if they did it that way. What's interesting is they found his genes. He's 60,000 years old. What should they be? African. What were they? They admit this. The mitochondrial DNA of WLH3 is an extinct gene that doesn't relate to any other gene on this planet. Why? It just got off the boat. It's got to be African. So when I say I've got science on my side, I could keep doing this science.
Sorry, they'd make that statement and then just leave it there? Look,
you read Deborah Smith's, I shouldn't have said that. I've spoken to Deborah Smith quite a few times in the Sydney Morning Herald. She writes about the fact that Denisovians, she said they're 80,000 years old and they're genetically linked to the Australians, but she doesn't throw in that story, oh, let's talk about the out of Africa theory when they got here 60,000 years ago. Why? They just leave a section of as it is. You've got to remember, and I'm not blaming scientists for this, nearly every scientist now specialises in one area. None of them really specialise in the big picture. So what they do is they do their little part of the story and they don't link it in. But if you tell me that we've got unique mitochondrial DNA that's not found anywhere else in the world and it's 60,000 years old, and I've got Siberians with our DNA that's 80,000 years old, the out of Africa theory just doesn't fit in. It's not part of this story.
So ultimately, what does it matter? Out of Africa, out of Australia, what's the significance?
The significance is really important here because it's really important to understand. A culture is made up of its history, of its people, of its artefacts and its language. We now today have a culture that's based on this. It's based on out of Africa. It's based on the Darwinian approach of survival of the fittest. It's based on a theory that we came out of Africa and then we conquered other places, we took other places, and it's become part of our psyche. The same way, if you look at our last 4,000 years, if kids study history today, what do they study? Basically wars, conquest. countries taking over other countries. What it actually does is this. It's bastardized the world history. Our claim is this. Up until about 6,000 years ago, when the Aboriginal people went out and settled in America, maybe 600,000 years ago. I've got dates like that over there too, believe me. I've got geologists saying they were there 400,000 years ago, 300,000 years ago, lots of them. When they went around the rest of the world, the people that they lived there, that they bred with, that they shared with, lived under the precepts of the dreaming. Until we had money and farming, I believe that the whole of the planet lived as cooperative, spiritual, nature-loving people that live with nature, for nature, never against nature. Now, what our history now is, and what we believe our history always is we're warlike people, that this is what we do for a living. I ask you today, how much of our money is spent on surveillance and war? And I'll guarantee it's more than half of what we make all up together. We validate that by saying that's the way we are.
It's human nature.
Yeah, we are not like that. According to the dreaming, we should have been living in the precepts of the dreaming. I want you to understand, Lisa, that the Aboriginal people I'm not trying to make out that they are perfect, that they know everything. They had wars too, nearly always over women, but they had wars. But think of the differences and think of the difference this makes. When they had wars, they found an agreed place, not on country. And when the war was finished, they went back to their place. Did they take the other person's place? Did they steal their history to justify what they did? Did they rape the women? Did they steal the children? Did they take their things? No, they did not.
But they didn't even kill each other either. That was not the intention.
No, it happened. If it was a mistake, if it happened, it wasn't meant to be that. The spilling of blood or someone falling was enough. It did happen sometimes. In war, they did die, but that wasn't intentional. It was more a game of football under much harsher rules. But I've read accounts that went on for 3 days where they never hurt each other. But what we need to understand is they had a system and law, and I mean both ways of spelling that, where you never went onto someone's country, so therefore your history remained intact all the time. Nothing was stolen. So you always belonged to your country. I've said this before, Lisa, and I know I said it on your show before. The worst punishment a person on country could be given was to be sent off country and never come back because your soul could never reincarnate. This is what they thought. And they told everyone else in the world that's how the world was. And they all lived that way. Then around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, we started to farm, we started to make cities, and we started to have money, and we started to break that law. And that's why the Aboriginal people stopped sailing to the rest of the world. That's why the Egyptians came here. That's another part of the story we'll get to. But that's why they came here, because they were trying to learn and still trying to keep that tradition alive within a sedentary culture. And I suspect around the time of Isis, Osiris, Akhenaten, I think to an extent that may have worked. They may have been living something close to the dreaming in a sedentary society. But I know for a fact that once we lost that heritage, we have a religion that's based around the tenets of men behaving badly. And what we also did, very, very important, and this is the other part that's been stolen, is the women got taken out of our history and out of our religion. And what that means is that what we now have is an overload of testosterone, and the women were the moderating influences in the dreaming. Remember, I told you before, 2 men could only fight if a woman would agree to adjudicate and tell them when the fight was finished, because we needed the women to control our natural, and a lot of men have that anger inside them. It was what was essential to keep the balance, and we lost that balance. Now, once you take the women out of the equation and once you have us competing against nature, then you start to get a break in the way we live. And if you look at our warfare really was a conflict between the sedentary races and the hunter-gatherer races. And slowly but surely, we know which group lost. They lost because they didn't have the aggression and they didn't have the capacity to wipe out the children and the women and stuff like that and do the stuff the other group did. So what we've lost is our rightful history and our heritage. And what we've been given is a pack of lies. And here's the other part of the equation. The other reason why this is so important, and this is the more important reason, is I've said this before and I'm going to say it every time I ever speak about this. The elders give me this stuff and give us this stuff because they want it out this year. We're going to come back to Pleiades here, I'm afraid.
Oh,
They
that's good.
wanted.
That works for me.
Well, it works for you, but it causes me a lot of grief. Look, they came here. The reason that it does work for you, the reason I'm being given all this stuff is every elder, I'm not going to, there is no exception to this rule. Everyone will say the same thing to me. You have to get it out this year. Not next year, not the year after. The reason why we're putting out these two things on YouTube is because we've got a documentary crew, as you know, that are filming this, and you've met them. That'll be used in the past. We can't have it then. That's too late. That'll be after the event when we're all looking about what happened. The YouTubes, we've got about 5, and we've got some more coming out. They've got to come out this year straight away because the elders want them out now. They say this. There's a huge change coming, and you white fellas are going to lose your satellites. You're going to lose your computers. You're going to lose your system. You're going to lose your money, and you're going to fall apart, and you're going to want something. You're going to want a way of living, and the way of living is the dreaming. Now, I'm not saying we're going to walk around and become hunter-gatherers, but we are going to live under the tenets of the dreaming again. That's not what they think. It's what they know.
What do you mean by the tenets of the dreaming?
Well, for me, the tenets of the dreaming, we actually have one of our books, Mary Magdalene's Dreaming. We have what we believe are 9 principles of the dreaming. And those principles are what I think are sacrosanct. The first one is equality of gender. The second one is a scary one that most people really won't like that much, that all beings, all pieces of force, everything, all energy forces are equal, that I am equal to a rabbit, that my soul is no better, no worse than a rabbit. The Aboriginal people, when they're formed, they are formed by a spirit that creates them and creates a totem. That totem is their brother or sister. And I've read stories where a snake has been killed and a Walbury man has fallen on the ground and broken their tears and said, my brother is dead, and meant it because his brother has died. They see the spirits as being equal, and they see animals as being equal. When they hunt, they will sing to the spirit of the wallaby or kangaroo and ask for permission. And when it's done, they sing and give dance again in thanks for their brother giving them that. They believe that because they believe we're all the same. If we lived just with the first 2 tenets of the dreaming, that women are equal to men, in fact, I'm going to correct that, women are slightly more equal than men, and that all spirits, all animals, and that includes tree. Bill Bettineggi will say, tree is my brother. All things are equal. If we live like that, we wouldn't have an issue. There are more things that are part of that, but for that, those 2 things are basic. And those 2 things are
those 2 things change the world overnight. I mean,
they do, because as I said, the Aboriginal people, the traditional people, look at a tree and call it their brother. If you've ever read Bill Nedge's story, he says, if you cut that tree, you get headache, you get sick because you hurt the tree. Tree is my brother. He got blood too. He grows at night like us. He sees tree as the same. Then he sees grass is the same. Everything is the same. They see we are connected. Christianity, the preferred perverted form of Christianity, has a triangle, a pyramid, with us on the top and creation below. The Aboriginal people have a circle, and we're all on that arc, and we're all placed, and we go around together. We might come back next time as a dolphin. We might come back next time as a person. We'll come back to country, but we aren't special. What we are, we're not intelligent. We are not the most intelligent animal on this planet. For God's sake, look around. We are the cleverest, but not the most intelligent. I resent the fact they have an IQ test. I'm a teacher. It's not an IQ test. It's a cleverness test. It's got nothing to do with intelligence. I see very, very, very few human beings that are intelligent. I see a lot that are clever. So we should not be on the top of that pyramid. We shouldn't never even be near the pyramid. We are part of the web of life. The Aboriginal people see that as the basis of what we're on about. So there's no other way of looking at it but that. And if I can, it's important to understand that belief in the dreaming and those tenets of the dreaming, they're still in all the religions. They're still in Christianity. I mean, Gnosticism is basically, we found all 9 tenets of dreaming in Gnosticism. It's still there. It's still there. But it's an inconvenient truth. Because the central part of it is, we believe that the actual custodian of the mysticism is Mary Magdalene. The tricky part of the story is the women, if it's done properly, are the main custodians of the special secrets. The women's understand, because the women have one link that men will never have. Women can create. We can't. Men can't create. Basically, you can grow a body inside, a brand new being, and give it a passage for the soul to live in. What can men do? Oh, they're there for about 3 minutes on a good day, and that's about it. Right? So really, let's get honest. The men have nothing to do with this. Don't forget, most Aboriginal societies will tell you the point of conception is an arrangement between the women, the unborn soul, and the spirit. The men, they're not in that. They're not in that. That's what needs to be put back into our religion. So there is no doubt that the dreaming, I see it. I mean, the reincarnation story there that the Buddhists believe and the Hindus believe, that comes out of the dreaming. That comes out of the dreaming too. So those tenets are still around, but they've been bastardized. And I mean that deliberately, because what's happened is in a lot of cases, institutions have got a hold of religion and turned it into something horrific. And we don't need to go further down that line to see what that's like. But that's what's happened to the dreaming.
When you say that they want it out this year because they know that there's something coming, and you also made reference, you said the word event. You said after the event. You want to give details about what this event might be, and also how are the Indigenous people of this country preparing for it?
Yeah, I can to an extent, because I have to be careful here because they are preparing, but I don't want to give too much about how. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting very general about that. There are groups of elders that are meeting, and there are meetings taking place. They're not publicised. You won't read about it. Well, you won't hear about it in 60 Minutes or read about it in the Daily Telegraph. They are taking place. They're keeping them quiet. But conversely, they are also making sure whitefellas know about it. This is why the Ramanjeri call this Wirrichin, blackfella, whitefella dreaming. They want the whitefellas to know about this. They are preparing. As for the event, I've used this once before. I've spoken about this before, and it's okay to speak about it again. I'm going to give you an actual example of what I think is going to take place. And I will not use any names, and I'm going to be deliberately vague, except I am going to use a place, which is Darwin. I know this story. I know the person who told me this story because I sat next to them, and he was there at the time. And this is a person who doesn't lie. You're just going to have to take my word for it. This is a man who tells the truth, a very plain-speaking man, very wise man, knows his stuff and knows what he's doing. He was in Darwin and met an elder, and I mean a proper elder. Not just because you've got grey hair. I mean a person that knows their stuff big time. And the story goes something like this. It either happened, I think it happened this year. I'm pretty sure it did. If not, it happened at the end of last year, one of the two. This particular elder came into a park in Darwin, and I'll be specific about this park from here on, and he had some form of staff. Remember I spoke about staffs before being important? Mm-hmm. Remember ISIS had a staff that could change all of nature, all of science. And we talk about the staff that we saw on the wall there. He had this staff, and of course Thoth also carried an implement too. And what he did was he picked the staff up and he rammed it into the ground. And as he did that, the guy that was sitting next to this other guy that was telling the story acknowledged this happened to him. That particular fellow, a really big man, a huge man, fell to the ground in the park and lay there for 5 hours, completely asleep, knocked out. Through the whole of Darwin, as this man dropped the staff into the ground and said, I'm going to lift up the vibration level just a little bit to prepare. People through the whole of Darwin, and you can check this because it is well documented, collapsed in the streets, in the parks, in their houses. Ambulance was running all over the place. People were taken to hospital. It was written about in the paper the next day. It was dismissed as a strange 24-hour virus. Dismissed. Hundreds of people fell and just fell to the ground and slept. When they woke up, they didn't have a runny nose. They didn't have a bronchial condition. They had nothing. They just got up and woke up and walked again. What he said he was doing is just lifting up the vibration that much. What I suspect, and I have been told by others, is the event that takes place will be not just one shaft, not one minor lift up in vibration, but a huge shift in vibration, a huge shift. Now, what that entails, whether that means we can see the fourth and fifth dimension, because if you remember the string theory, the quantum physicists today, however, the scientists of today that are also spiritual, talk about the fact that the other side is 1/1,000,000th of a centimetre away. It's here. Heaven is here with us, and the spirits are with us now. Whether that is the time where those things become apparent, I suspect it is.
So we really could be looking at, I mean, if what he did was raise the frequency just a little bit in preparation and it knocked people out for 5 hours. What's occurred to me is if it's a huge shift, there's also talk about 3 days of darkness. That could be literally us all falling asleep for 3 days.
I think you would find that since everyone incarnated onto this planet is not perfect, I still haven't met anyone that is. I've met quite a few claim it. I think that all of us have baggage. None of us are on the right level. If we were on the right level, we wouldn't have been incarnated back. All of us must fall. I'm suspecting that some of the elders may just basically have daydream for a couple of seconds and they'll be okay. But I think everyone's going to fall. My suspicion is, and I might be wrong, but I don't think I am, that some won't wake up. It's too much of a shift for them. It's too big. It's too far for them to cope with, and they won't be able to wake up. I suspect the 3 days of darkness you talk about, for some, well, let's take the gentleman that fell for 5 hours. He's sitting amongst all these Aboriginal people. He's very, very in tune with the Aboriginal story, and he believes all this sort of stuff. He really does. He's an empathetic being. You sit around all these people that all come from the same angle. He's not a redneck. He's certainly not a person that goes around killing people or harming people. He's all the right sort of people, but he went to sleep for 5 hours on that. He obviously believes in it all. And I'm thinking, well, he's gone 5 hours on just a little shift. For him, it may be 3 days, but he'll come back. I'm wondering about the ones that just don't get it. If he's gone down for 5 hours on a little shift, I'm just wondering if they will ever wake up, whether that darkness will be longer than 3 hours. I can only guess there and read between the lines, but my understanding is, yes, some won't wake up. And maybe the ones that won't wake up, we won't miss. I've got a pretty good people we're talking about, and honestly, if they don't wake up, it may well be the world will be a much better place without them. And I'm not referring to the generals. I'm referring to all sorts of people. I'm referring to the guys that do financial reports on the ABC. And I'm not going to mention his name, but I look at him every time and think, there's the devil incarnate, because all he ever talks about is money. I won't mention his name. Maybe he won't wake up either. That's what I'm told. Now,
what about the after effects? Has this gentleman talked about how he feels, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, anything about how he feels after that event?
Didn't ask because it was the other guy that was telling the story. And okay. I didn't ask how he felt because that guy that was telling the story never fell asleep at all. He was awake the whole way through. I mean, not everyone fell. Let's get this straight. Hundreds and hundreds of people fell. I don't know how far the vibration went out from that central point in the park. I have no idea because we didn't go into details. It was enough to hear that story and to look at the person who gave me that story, and knowing that I do know this guy, the one thing he would never do, and I want to tell you a point, the same guy said, if you told me 3 months ago I was talking about Pleiadians and stuff like that, I would have punched you out. And here he is, and I'm thinking that's exactly what I was going to say. We're both passengers into this story. Either of us, 3-4 months ago, if you told us we're going to talk like that, we both would have laughed about it. We've both been forced into it simply because of the weight of evidence. I really do suspect when that shift takes place, I think the Pleiadians are going to make sure that they're aware again. Now, as I said before, I've been told another story by the person who knows more of Uncle Reuben's story that said that they came quite recently, not 800,000 years ago, not 40,000 years ago. This Messiah-like figure was a recent event, maybe 400 years ago. So this contact is not just one-off. The way I didn't know this, and this is what I was told, there's no way I can link this story of who came with way back 800,000 years. It was made very clear to me this was quite recent. So if that's the case, and as you probably know on YouTube, there are all sorts of YouTube films out at the moment. I've seen some of some sort of crafts that are taking place floating around. And we've all probably seen the story about this thing that comes through the sun and comes out the other side. Are they waiting? Are they parked out there waiting for this particular time? And yeah, we have heard, and you've heard this too, Lisa, we've all heard the stories about the rumblings under the earth. That's going everywhere. In fact, I read in 9MSN yesterday, the scientists have decided the rumbling in one place, which is really huge in America, they said it's fish mating. They're trying to make it.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
They described the rumbling. It's taking place in America, and everyone in America in this one place is hearing this rumbling underneath the earth. Oh, I said, no, it's the mating call of mackerel or fish or something. I think, oh, God, guys, you really are clutching at straws. All that stuff I'm hearing about, we've all heard about the noises underneath the earth. I'm not going to insult your viewers because they've all heard it too. Is this all building up to something? Yes, that's what they're all telling me. And I will say this, and I've said this before. If it doesn't, I know so many elders that will be absolutely distraught and probably won't have a purpose in living anymore. They are so much prepared for this and so convinced it's going to happen. And it's that absolute conviction that sways me more than any of the science, that the way that they just know it, not
just the elders. I mean, the people who consider themselves light workers all around the planet who have been working and waiting for this for 20 or more years are going to feel exactly the same.
Well, they're saying that too, and I know that. And I'm not speaking on behalf of them because I'm aware of the fact they're saying that. And yeah, look, I know I've been told December, and I've even been told the number, which is the number we know, that the 23, 21 number we hear all the time. I've heard that from the Aboriginal people. They don't refer to the Mayan calendars. They refer to other things. They just say the spirits keep telling them. They know that they're ready. I've been told, we know that BHP now are not going to mine at Roxby Downs. And I know Tony Abbott tried to use that as a carbon argument, carbon tax argument. No, that's not what happened.
Does that mean that they're listening to the Indigenous people, or did something else freak them out?
No, because BHP aren't going to do it, and they know that the lizard spirit came up, and that big red dust storm came out of the centre and blew across, and they know that all the elders said they were drawn to there. The spirits told them to go there, and they said that the spirits will take no more of this. That was a sign for them. They knew that was a sign. It still blows me away that BHP walked away from that because they were going to make so much money out of that. There's so much uranium there. But they were saying, the original people were saying, and I'm going to try and get that word right eventually. It'll get in there. I've been trained to say original. We'll get rid of it. They are saying the signs are massive, and they are hearing those signs. Now, we can't hear them. I can't hear them. It doesn't matter. I don't need to. These guys tell me that's what's going on. That's good enough for me. My job and our job in this deal is very simple. We just tell people what they tell us. I don't speak on behalf of anyone. I just relay what I'm told. I try and get it right word for word. I got one story wrong recently, made a couple of details and mistakes, and I apologised to the person 3 times for that because I got it wrong. I got a couple of details wrong, but I got the story basically right. And that was another story about the rumbling and the earthquake. So we know this is all going to happen. They know it.
One of the questions that did come up after our last interview was, why aren't the original people talking directly to people like me or others instead of talking to you, and why aren't they coming out and speaking directly?
It's not, look, that's important, but I want to make a point. I'm not some sort of chosen thing because I'm not the only person they're talking to. You've got to be careful about this. I want everyone to understand it's not just me that's hearing this story. And can I make a point? You know this too, Lisa. I've got a group of about 25 people. We're all working as a combination together, and I'm basically like the drop-off point in the centre there. But I'm getting lots of information from other people, and I'm relaying it. So, and some of those people are white fellas that are getting part of this story too. So what I'm getting is all the bits and information that are coming from other people. So let's be really clear about this. Let's pull, yeah, okay, I'm the face at the moment doing this, and we've written the books. The reason, I can say this, the reason why the Ram and Jerry chased us up is because we had, I mentioned a little bit of that science before. We had all the white fella science. We had all these white fella science that could put it into their story. And that's something that maybe people hadn't done before, and that gave us a leg in. And that's why the Ram and Jerry called us down there. That's why they gave us ceremony. And they said, and they have, they read every article I put in National Indigenous Times that mentioned them. They read all our books. And they said, this is right. What you've said is right. But you're saying in a way that the white fella will listen to. And I think they made another point. It's an important one. I'm trying to convince people on the fence and maybe not even near the fence, and some of them are racist. They aren't going to listen to a black fella telling them that story. They may listen to me if I hit them with science first, and then if I can bring the story in as well. I might have a better chance of getting to those white people than maybe an Aboriginal person can, and maybe that's the reason they've asked me to do that. But make no bones about this. There are others who know about this too, and maybe to an extent, because I'm getting a lot of this out, well, they're pulling back a bit and saying, well, okay, that's what I was told, that's cool. But I'm not the only one who's hearing this. But maybe because of the fact we wrote our books, and yeah, our books were vetted through University Press of America, which gives it a bit more cred, that means we can go through the white fella scientist way, and I can argue with Y chromosomes, I can argue with skull morphology, I can do the mitochondrial DNA and the genome sequencing and argue effectively with these people who say I'm wrong. I can fight them science for science. But remember this, I always introduce our science, always, by saying, before we begin the science, let's tell you the truth. These are the people who know everything. Their story is what we start with, and we always do it the same way. Blackfellas tell us this is true. Now we'll give you some whitefella science to prove it. So to an extent, it's that, but it's also we are not alone. There are many others who are hearing the same story. And I think you're going to find others are going to start coming out as well as to support what we're saying now. And we've got people basically in every state that are on our side. I know there's a guy in Northern Territory going up the Kimberleys now to look at an Egyptian site. Now, when he finds that, I've never seen it. I don't know what it's like. He won the right to go and see it. He's talking to the elders up there trying to convince them to let it in. And then I'll come along and say, hey, listen to this. And everyone's going to say, gee, you found out about that too. No, I didn't. I didn't find out about that. Someone told me. The same way I've been taken to places by other whitefellas who were shown by Aboriginal people. And then they got permission to show me. So sometimes I'm passing on things at the third and fourth hand. So it is out there. There are a lot of people who know about it. It's just basically because of the fact we had that university tick that makes a difference when you're talking to whitefellas who are a lot of them, not all, but a lot of whitefellas want proof. They want empirical proof. You tell them someone believes, they don't believe it.
But what are they talking about? What we need to do in order to prepare for this event? Are they giving any indication as to what we're supposed to do?
Yeah. Become part of Wiradjuri. Black fella, white fella dreaming. You see, that's the banner we were given to speak for. And if people say, what gives you the right to talk? I say, because I was given ceremony by the Ramangeri. And they told me that was our job. That's what gives me the right. I wouldn't speak. I would not speak like this now publicly if I wasn't given that right through ceremony. That's
how does the average person around the planet do that?
What they do is they go around and they start spreading the news, and then they'll find that the original people will come to them. Once they start talking like that, they will, by coincidence, which is no such thing, they will meet people. They will meet people because they're meant to. What you're supposed to do, because it is no longer a blackfella story. This is really important, and the original people need to understand that. Some don't get that also. It's been made very clear to me. No, it is a shared story. Therefore, that's why I've got the right to speak. If it was just a blackfella story, I've got no right. We all have the right to speak on that behalf, and we have the right as whitefellas who are empathetic towards Aboriginal culture and Aboriginal law to say so.
And because it's our history.
Yeah, you're allowed to speak about this now. We are all allowed to speak about it and share what's taking place and tell people that the Aboriginal people, the original people are telling you now, get ready, there's a change coming, prepare for it. And understand, if you're going to say that, understand one thing. When that change comes, look to these people, look to the elders who know the law and ask them. Don't go to Tony Abbott, don't go to Julia Gillard, don't go to the politicians anymore. They are going to be babes in the wood when this takes place. They will not know what to do or what to say. They'll be no use to us anymore. We will have to go back to people who know the old ways, and I don't. One ceremony doesn't give me the right to speak about the old ways. It gives me the right to say what I'm told, and I know probably 1/50th of what they know. It's what some of the old people know. You give me a staff and put it in the ground and see what I do. You know what'll happen? It'll stick in the ground. And nobody will have any impact unless they fall on top of it. I can't do that sort of stuff. I can't sing people. I can't read people's minds. I can't telepath. I can't move from one place to another. But I know Aboriginal people who can still do that to this day. There's some of these people out there have got powers that we wouldn't even get our heads around. They are the ones I want leading me, and they should be telling others, get ready. We've got people out there that don't care about anyone but everyone. They're the ones we want leading us from now on, not the ones we've got at the moment. And guess what? Most of them are Aboriginal. Fine. I don't care what colour they are. If they know what to do and know where to take us, they will take us. So the people out there that are thinking like we are, keep talking. That's all they want you to do. That's your preparation. And if you believe what they're saying is right, yeah, you'll go to sleep for a few hours, but you'll wake up again because you're meant to, because you've been saying the right thing. And I think to an extent too.
So to have the intent to be part of the black fella, white fella dreaming.
Yeah, that's all you got to do. Just put your hand up and say, I'm ready to get on board. Get ready to get on board. And then you will find, I'll guarantee you this, don't go looking. They'll find you. They'll hear about your words. They'll hear about what you're saying. And then someone one day will come around and introduce themselves, and they'll be important. And when they come the first time, welcome them in and listen to everything they've got to say, and then they'll take you in. They'll give, I mean, I'm not going to say everyone's going to get ceremony, but you might get a conversation. You might get a conversation. And the more you start talking about the fact that these guys have the answers, they had the answers. We didn't listen. When we came here 200 years ago, they did their penance for 200 years, 10 generations, as they call it, before their time came back. They always knew their time was coming back again, always knew it. And now it's coming back. We have to acknowledge it. And if you want to know what the country can do something really magnificent. If they really want to get ready and prepare themselves, go to the politicians and tell them to do this. Tell them to pass a law that says that all of Australia is given back. Give it back to the people who owned it. Don't be scared. Don't think they're going to come around to your flash house and take it and move in all of a sudden and say, brother, we're moving in, get out, it's ours now. That won't happen. If you really want to make the first step, if the country wants to make the first step, if we want to see something happening within our own country that other people can pick up, go back and say, okay, we stole the country. There was no treaty signed. There was never a treaty signed. Mind you, there was a treaty signed with the Spanish and the Egyptians, which means they've got more right of claim than the British, and the British know that. That's one of the reasons they want to talk about it. But give it back. Give it all back. And then see what happens. And then that really will be Wirrichin, blackfella, whitefella dreaming. You know what the blackfellas will give back? They'll give back every house we own, every piece of freehold we own, and everything we've already got. They won't take a thing off us. But when it comes to mining, when it comes to things that have taken place in leasehold land and Commonwealth land, they'll control that. Now, if you think they're going to stop all mining and stop everything, that's bullshit. No, but they'll do it properly, and they'll make sure it's done properly, and they'll moderate it, and they'll pull back, and we'll try and find other ways of doing things, ways where we get energy from other forms other than just burning. But they'll do it properly. And we might have half a dozen elders and a couple of whitefellas together that might make up a central council. And I'll tell you now, it'll be better than what we've got now. So it's a real simple equation. Start talking and tell people. And when someone talks poorly about Aboriginal people, don't step back. Step in and tell them, you don't know what you're talking about, guys. There's something going on. And these guys are getting ready and they're trying to prepare for you. All we've done is spit on them for 200 years, but they're still putting their hand out saying, come with us, brother and sisters. They're still waiting to come. And you think about that. Really, we've given them nothing, and in return, they want to give us guidance again. And we've asked for nothing, and we've done nothing. And they want to help us. So they know the change coming. And they're preparing for that change. And, you know, a lot of us whitefellas know it too. You said that before, Lisa. We're sensing it too. And I've noticed myself, a lot of people now are sensing something. I'll tell you what I have noticed. So many whitefellas around my age are dying en masse. And a lot of men are questioning. I noticed recently a lot of rednecks. I play tennis with a lot of awful people. And I've noticed recently they're talking about that. And some of them are starting to think there's more to life than working. And I know some men that are in their 50s are retiring early because they think they're going to die any day now. And they're wondering about some sort of change. And I hear them muttering. Some of these people that, as I said, that aren't even on the fence but on the other side that I'm trying to get to, they're starting to talk about things they'd never say before. And they're sensing something. And these people don't read what we read, don't talk to the people we talk, but they still sense something's not quite right. Something's amiss. They're sensing it.
I made the same comment the other day to somebody else that um, there is a large community of people who believe that Palladians and Arcturians and Andromedans and a whole bunch of other ETs are out there, and cleaning up the negativity on this planet and playing a huge part in this event and this shift. And a large proportion of the audience and the proponents of this way of thinking, from my observation, are middle-aged white guys.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's extraordinary, really. It's not the young, new age hippie-dippies. It's middle-aged white guys.
But if you went back a generation, those middle-aged white guys would have been becoming more and more conservative and rednecked. And that's the only way to put it. But I've noticed that myself. I'm hearing things from people now that I knew were really, really redneck people. I'm hearing words coming out and I think, where did that come from? Where did that come from? You are right. And they are the ones that are the worst offenders in each generation. They're the ones that are the most dangerous and they ruin the place the most. They are now saying things that I'd never heard before. All they need now is some guidance and leadership. I think that's coming up. It's coming out everywhere. They need guidance and leadership to put some thoughts and some ideas in their head that are now starting to form up. They're not fully developed. And that's why I've been saying to people, I'll talk to anyone. And I know some people, and I've said this before, I know some people are incredibly racist, and it sickens me when I hear what they say. But I also know, I know them well enough to know they're also good people. And yeah, they've got some major issues to deal with, but I know that there's a chance, and they're around that age you just said, there is a chance those people could still get on the fence and maybe even fall the right way if they were given a bit more information. Now, they are not going to get it from our media as it is now. That's not where they're going to get it from. They're going to get it for this sort of stuff. And that's why I know nothing about computers, as you know. I can basically turn them on. The reason we're going this way, because I'm not going to go through the media, because there's no use doing that. It'll get ruined straight away. Here we get the message out properly and it can spread. And I know wherever I go, those people, not the ones like ourselves that understand there's something coming. It's the ones who aren't sure anymore and are losing heart and hope with what they've got and are really starting to question everything and looking outside the box, but don't know where to look, but know that there's something that's not quite sitting. They're the ones that I'm interested in. And, to an extent, you look at that Obama phenomenon. They thought they were voting for a Messiah. Honestly, that's what they thought they were getting. Those people in America, the ones who voted for them, they just weren't voting for politics. They were voting for something intrinsically deep inside that they didn't fully understand. They wanted Obama to lead them to the promised land. But he can't because of what he's around. The system won't let him do that. But that's what that was about. That's really what that was about. It was about they thought that somehow one Messiah-like figure, remember what we told about coming down here in a diamond, would give them the information and lead them on to a better life because they know what they've got sucks. That's what they know. That's what they really understand. They're not happy anymore. The money and the lights just aren't doing it anymore. They know there's something more to it than what they've been given. And I saw that as being really important, but I didn't see it in a political sense. I saw it as a burgeoning of something within, of that yearn and understanding that there's something that's changing, something coming about. And they thought that maybe Obama could do it. No, he can't, because the system has got to change first. And the only way it's going to change is fall apart. And, of course, the first part of that is the money. Once the money falls, then the mortgages and the reasons why people are tied into a way of living and a way of thinking, that will fall too. Because their God was a false God. The money was a false God. It didn't give them what they thought they'd do. They thought money would give them happiness. And what it's now going to give them is grief. And we see it in Europe, don't we? We see people now just thinking the whole system is corrupt and they are desperate. I feel like it's the beginning of the late 60s again, because old enough. You aren't. But I was old enough to be in there. And those that were there know there was a period of about 4 or 5 years where there was a massive amount of change taking place, where the whole of society felt galvanised towards something new. And amongst the young kids, I know, which are the ones today that are the problem, but there was something then. You could sense it. It was palpable. It was something you could feel everywhere. And people thought there was going to be something marvellous that took place. And then, of course, the system got a hold of the whole thing and brought it back down and destroyed it. They did it last time. This time, they
There was a quote from a movie. Oh, what's his name? The two guys from Easy Rider. What's his name?
Dennis Hopper.
Dennis Hopper. It was a movie in the 90s from Dennis Hopper. And he said the 90s are going to make the 60s look like the 50s. And he was almost right. You know, it did sort of start then. But I know what you're talking about. It's really starting to kick in now.
Look, I was there before, and I'm lucky because I knew what it was like. I was a teenager as it began and watched the whole thing grow. And I remember in the early 60s, it was redneck paradise. It really was. It was really an appalling place to live. Well, we all did the same thing. We all dressed the same way. We all ate the same things, and we did everything the same. It really was. And that's what we went through was, look, what's the alternative? Is the Howard years, the same sort of thing. Redneck paradise. Then all of a sudden, we get a change, but this government, the Labor government, slightly left of right, but they couldn't do it either. They couldn't do it either. So it's got to come this time. It can't come out of politics. It's going to come from within and underneath, and we're going to change them.
And it's coming from the ground up this time.
This time it has to come from the ground up because it tried to come from the middle and from the top, and it never worked in the 60s and 70s. We learn our lesson there. We learn our mistake. We educate people from underneath. We tell all the people that want to listen. They tell others. And as you said before, how can they get in contact with the Aboriginal people? Start talking. Talk the right talk, and they will listen. And they'll hear. They'll know you're saying it. Believe me, the spirits will tell them. I've had elders who come to me and said, I came to you because another elder told me about you and they heard about you because they know what you're saying. As soon as you say the right things, I'll come to you. So there is a change coming. I sense it and I feel it. And we're all going to be dreadfully disappointed if it doesn't come. But you know what? I don't think we are going to be this time. I think we're going to go the whole way. And I sense, and I'm so powerfully convinced, especially, I've got to be honest, hearing that story in Darwin, when I heard that story that day, had a big impact on me because it made me feel like, yeah, that's the way it would happen. And I sort of sensed that was the way anyway. I knew that myself.
It actually reminds me of a Bible passage. 1,000 will fall on your left and 1,000 on your right. There's a passage in the Bible. Don't quote me. I'm not a Bible person, but
yeah, that's brilliant. It is right. Yeah, 1,000 on the right, 1,000 on the left, and there were thousands that fell in Darwin. Yeah, it's all prophetic, isn't it? And of course, you look at all the prophecies and all the religious books. They talk of a golden age of 1,000 years. They talk about that time, and everyone's been looking for it for thousands of years when it was going to be. And of course, I think that's what we're going through now, all part of the same thing. So when it gets back to it, those glyphs, and somebody said something once, David Fitzgerald said something, I saw in a video he did in the 1990s before he walked away from the place for 20 years and shut up because he got so fed up with it. He made an amazing comment. He said, you know, I feel like this is a time tunnel. He said, I think there's something really prophetic here, a prophecy, because we haven't read the whole thing yet. I've read the story about the civilization. I've read about the genetic engineering. I can't read the finish yet. I'm still working on that. I'm still working on that part. Yes, I've read the part about the two Egyptians, and that is there too. But is it in there? Can someone who knows this better than I, because I've just about reached my limits in what I can read there, is there a prophecy there? I don't know. When I go back to the walls next time, and I've been there now 6 times now, I'm going to spend some time looking at the last part there and seeing if there's a prophecy.
Well, I've got 2 questions for you because one, we've been talking for over 2 hours now, so we probably need to wind this up. But we're also in September. You know, we're talking 4 months left of this year. If there's anything to know, if there's anything that we need to know in order to prepare, now's the time to find that out. And secondly, you've made mention in the past of a cave called the ET cave or the extraterrestrial cave. Have you been there yet?
I should have said that. I actually thought about that, and I've said it a couple of times, and I still haven't got permission to go, and I should have said that. I blew it, and I've done it again. Yes, look, there is this. Look, I may not get to go to it now because I've mentioned it a couple of times. I can't, and I won't say what's in there because I was told. I can tell you this. If I do get to go, and I probably won't because I've blown it. I've even said it on the YouTube too. I said, oh, God, I've said it again. I should shut up about that because I normally never mention where I'm going till I got there, and I'm very careful about it, and I never give away.
But we don't know where it is. We don't know anything about it other than the fact that a cave exists and that's what they call it.
Do that. I've got some other stuff that's even more amazing than that, and I'm not going to give that one away because I might still get that one. But in this one, all I can say is at that particular place, which very few people know about, if it was seen, there's evidence there that you can't contest it. It can only be done if somebody was in the sky, well above, flying above, and it's the only way that particular thing could be in the cave, on the floor, marked and engraved on there. There is a marker in there, and the way it's been presented, that could only be done unless these people were levitating 20 k's up and they saw it and then went down. And if that's the case, let's learn about it anyway. I want to know that either way. There's something in there that you can't argue with. And I also know there is another place that I'm trying to line up at the moment where there is more of that stuff. So what I'm getting right now is I'm being told that there is absolute proof in this country, not just the Gosford Glyphs, which we know about, the cave I should have mentioned that I've mentioned again and again, which is also there. And there's another place up where I am, praise the Lord, because I've been going down there all the time, which also proves it. So, yes, we do have evidence coming out. The glyphs for me is part one. There's two more that are coming out, and I'll make a bet with you, Lisa. There's probably 50 others they've got sitting around at the moment. They're thinking, well, will we get that out too? And now I've mentioned that particular cave because that's not my name, by the way. I never gave it that name. That was a name that the Aboriginal people gave me to describe it. And I said, why do you call it that? And they told me, I said, oh, well, that's fair enough. Nothing else that can be called but that. All we need to do and answer your first question, I can't remember. I remember two questions at once. I'll multitask. Very fair.
Well, the fact that we only have 4 months left before the end of the year.
The right thoughts and say the right things, because I'm telling you now, our last 4 months will be judged on what we say and do. I can tell you that much. You can make all the mistakes you want in the past. We've got 4 months left. If you start saying the right things, thinking the right things, that'll be your judgment. And when it comes to that lift in vibration, if you're saying the right words, thinking the right things, when that vibration lifts up, you'll go with it. You may fall for a while, but you'll come back up again because you will always be judged by how you finish your life, not how you start your life, because we came here broken. We came here with mistakes. So it's expected we'll make those mistakes. But each opportunity, every life we get here, we have the opportunity to improve. So we aren't born perfect, but we can finish close to it. So the last 4 months, plenty of time to turn around. And what I would suggest is anyone that wants to from now on, when people start talking about the system they've got, risk it. Say to them, there's something changed. There's something coming. You might be surprised. They may be more empathetic now than they've ever been before. So I would say that. Don't hold it more.
I'm in the habit of already saying things like that when people start whinging about the system. I go, don't worry, it's not for long.
Yeah. And then
not much longer.
Yeah, take them further down that line. And, okay, some people are going to bite your head off, then walk away and say, fair enough, but you might well find that some people, that, as I said, our job now over the last 4 months is to drag as many people we can off that fence over to the right side. Don't leave them in the fence. If you think there's any chance they may listen, then go for it. And if there's no chance and you can see that there's a dark soul there, walk away. But if there's still some light in that soul and there's a chance you can save that soul, it's important you do. I think that's what they're expecting. I think the original people are expecting that. I am 99%, and I always say this now to cover my backside, sure the Pleiadian people, the Pleiadian beings are part of this and they want us to do the same thing. When they came down here and gave us the way to live, they did want us to do it. They didn't leave it as a joke and say, well, they're not going to do it anyway, but it was a good idea at the time. They expected us to do it. Now they don't expect it. They demand it. And if you don't play the game, you won't get to play anymore. It's that simple. You won't come back here. That's what I suspect. you don't do it right this time, this is your judgment. This is your final statement on this planet. And we've some statement now. And if we don't walk softly and say the right words, we will be judged by how we finish up. So I would suggest if you see someone that's not sure, try your hardest to bring them across. And if they don't, you get your tick anyway. You get your tick because you did the right thing. And if they didn't do it, they got their opportunity. And when the change comes, they can't say, I wasn't told.
Thanks, Stephen.
Pleasure. Always,
Beautiful
Lisa.
note to leave it on.
Okay. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it again. Wonderful.